This is going to be interesting.
So that old link is not gonna work, you know.
Yeah, the old link's not working.
Mm,
Technical difficulties. So I just reposted it on my feed.
yeah.
Mhm. There we go. There we go. Now the people are crowding in. It was true.
Hey.
Well, for no reason. There we go. There's the chat. For some reason, I can't see the chat on my live, on my StreamYard.
Mm, yeah, I don't see anything on there too,
Yeah.
but
So, oh dear, he made it. I can't believe he made it. It's not loading his photo.
Can y'all hear me?
Oh, there you go.
there he is.
Yes, we
Sorry.
can hear you.
Fancy restaurant just signed a contract for $200 million for train sets. You know,
Nice.
casual Wednesday
Those-
night things for the big kids. How's everybody doing?
Me and Paul were having a lot of fun trying to figure out how to go live.
Yeah.
Well, I was having a lot of fun trying to figure out how to go live. Paul was just kind of chilling there. Um,
Yeah, we're having a lovely outside dinner in Salt Lake City in 30-degree weather with all sorts of
Gotta
space
be chilly.
heaters and freezing right now.
that sounds fun.
Yeah.
You guys have any
So when
snow
I
over
got,
there?
yeah, there's snow everywhere around the city.
Gotcha.
And I don't know if you saw my story on Instagram, but there's some very beautiful snow dusted mountains in the background.
To be dead honest with you, I don't look at anything social media related, and I don't like anybody's posts and anybody thumbs up anything from anybody.
Unless it involves boobs.
Yeah, unless it involves
Or Crocs.
then or Crocs, especially Crocs. But
Boobs in Crocs. There you go. That should be our name right there. Boobs in Crocs.
Boobs and
uh,
Crocs.
they were thinking about I was thinking about a pair of Crocs and something dirty,
Gotcha.
shorts and Crocs.
I already
Tight.
know what it is.
So are we live? Can people actually see us and hear us?
We are live indeed. People
How many
see and
folks
hear
we
us.
got?
It says 13. I can't see any comments though. It's kind of a shame, as in I can't figure out where the comment section is. So
Who knows? But all right, gents, are we gonna at least dive into it and give them 15 minutes of the tax man before I go back to dinner in the nice 30-degree weather?
sure can. How about
Yeah.
since you won Oroville last year? Let's start with that because that's what everybody's here to hear, anyways. Everyone wants to know what your thoughts are on Oroville and what you would
Yeah,
do in Oroville.
I mean, I feel like I shouldn't say anything because I mean, I don't even know if I'm going to be there, so I don't want to set you up for sabotage. But kidding. I still don't know if I'm going to make it. But what I would really think to do, and just kind of what I've seen so far this year, was set up fishing other lakes around me and clear water fisheries with spotted bass. Fish some of the main lake coves, find bait, look for birds. I wouldn't really venture off looking for warmer water right now because we just haven't had the sun for it. You know what I mean? So I feel like fish are going to be concentrated in areas that have fast transitions, looking for those points that drop off pretty fast into deep water but have some sort of feature that holds fish. My favorite is a step. When you're looking at a point and it goes from shore to 20 feet, and then it stays 20 feet for 30 or 40 feet, and then it drops off down into 50, 60, 70 feet. That step is one of my favorite things to try to locate. And typically find those in Oroville around some of the main lake coves. And for me, particularly this time of the year when the fish are a little bit colder and less reactive, I really just love that 3-inch easy shiner on a drop shot. It's just foolproof. I feel like anybody's can go out there with that with no experience, not know what they do, drag it along the bottom like a jig and limit. But depending on how they set up, I think, people really stand to do well as far as numbers of limits, and somewhere in the ballpark of 76 to 80 is going to be average. I really expect to see a few folks do well. Somebody's going to get on a jerk bite. The jerk bait is going to definitely yield some bigger fish if you can find them up shallow in that brush on those steps. I think realistically 85 will take it. I feel like that's what you'd be aiming for, or at least I would be aiming for, is around 84 to 85. And I'd probably start with reaction, jerk baits, crankbaits, A-rigs, and then clean up shop with that Kitech Easy Shiner on a drop shot and just fill out the rest of my limit.
Hey Joseph,
So
what did you win with last year? Inches?
Kitech Easy Shiner,
No,
drop shot.
I'm talking about lengthwise.
On a
I think
technicality, 76.25 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I had 77.25.
Mm.
But that
so.
was some tough cold front fishing that definitely turned off the bite pretty quick. And I was just lucky
So my
that.
question to you, Joe,
Go ahead.
real quick for you, where would you find that largemouth kicker? In your opinion, where would you look for that largemouth kicker? Because
In
that's, I think,
every way,
the biggest
in
thing.
in every way, shape, or form, from every lake I fished this year, including our team tournament on Comanche, the largies are still shallow. I've
Yeah.
I've been catching largies in anything from 6 feet to 15 feet on brush, on rock. Um, I haven't had to go to those extreme depths like I did on Oroville to find actively feeding fish. And let me be clear, it wasn't that there weren't fish shallow. I could find fish shallow. I just couldn't get them to eat.
Hmm.
So for me, the kicker was literally turning around and casting behind me to see if the fish that were deeper would eat. And it turned out that they were the ones actively feeding. And if I were really looking for a kicker largemouth right now, I would be looking for the back of those main lake coves. Some of the nice creek channel with flowing water, maybe some timber if we've got enough flooding going on. If not, brush, especially brush to rock transition that holds the heat in. And I'd be fishing that jerk bait, or I'd be fishing a glide bait, some sort of reactionary bait to get that fish out. I mean, even you, Max. I mean, I feel like if you find the right area, even a lipless ripping through that brush would be a great reactionary strike to find that kicker. But I definitely feel like, for me personally, my game plan going into it would be find any bite, whatever it is, jerk bait, crankbait, A-rig, wherever it would be. Again, this is from the perspective of no pre-fish for me, at least. And then just clean up shop with that drop shot. It's usually on Oroville and Maloney's and all those other places. If you find a fish, there's probably 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 with them. And if you can get 5 out of that school, then you don't have to worry as much about finding that next kicker. And you can dork around with things like an LV 500 or Chad Shad or whatever it is that
Everything.
you're gonna
Go
try
big, huh?
to go big and go
Yeah.
home and get those extra 2 kickers. Even if you don't get bit, at least you filled that limit and you've given yourself that shot at potentially finding another bite for some bigger caliber of fish.
What you got
But
for
yeah,
him,
that
Pua?
would.
Go ahead,
Pua?
Joseph. You can continue.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that would be my 2 cents. Fill the limit. Once you find a bite, whatever it is, drop shot, crankbait, jerkbait, A-rig, spinnerbait, whatever it is, find some fish. And if you're not finding fish, just keep covering water. Keep looking in areas, keep looking at your graph, look for bait, look for birds. I would expect them, like I said, to be in main lake coves. But if you don't find them there, check some points, check some other areas until you do get that bite, and then just slow down. It's February. It's full blown winter bass fishing. These fish are not typically hunting down food and active packs and going crazy. So don't be afraid to fish a little slower than you think you might need to after you find that first bite.
Like,
What's that?
besides the besides the fact that I don't think I would be fishing the main lake coves, I would be upriver. That's just me. Especially with how the weather's looking and how much rain is actually coming. I would probably run upriver and try to find bait because generally the bait would be up there. But that's just me. Joseph is my
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
and
know
especially
what's
the winter.
funny?
Yeah. Go for it.
I'm
Go
in a
ahead,
mixed
Joseph.
bag about that too because there are some areas upriver that have those nice steps that have that brush pile. But history for me, specifically on Oroville now, fishing it a handful of times, even though intuitively, a place like Comanche, let me call out Comanche, even though it's a different style of fishery, um, Comanche, I 100% agree. I'd be like, yeah, let's go upriver. Let's check those flooded brush piles and submerged islands and various bottom contours that you can find upriver where the water's dirty, it's warmer, they're going to be super shallow. But with Oroville, I've always just found that those fish congregate in high numbers in little pockets off the main lake. And it's interesting because Maloney's is another good example of a spotted bass fishery with some largies in it, where I would say, yeah, go to the back of a creek channel, fish some points along the creek channel, find that dirtier water, find that warmer water. But Oroville specifically, for me, history-wise, has just always performed better in that main lake area.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know
That's
what's
good to know.
funny is I for Oroville last year I actually pre-fished quite a lot just because it's the first event of the year, and I made the mistake of fishing too early or pre-fishing too early, and that water was still kind of low, and then after that, that heavy storm came in, and that water just jumped up. All my waypoints were like 40, 50, 60 feet underwater, and so I think probably the way I'd go about it is don't pre-fish it too early. Because I've been monitoring the water level too, and you're talking about 2-3 feet a day. It's coming up, and all that juicy stuff, that all those humps that are visible right now, they're not going to be there. They're going to be 60, 70, 80 foot underwater come tournament
Well, and
time.
that was kind of my point, though, is I was actually sitting in 45 feet, casting into oblivion. I mean, the creek channel I was dragging up in was 120 feet. So I was sitting in 45, casting at a 30, a 60, and a 90 along 45 out as deep as I can. I only had 2 half-ounce drop shots, and I broke those off within like the first 30 minutes. So then it was
Oof.
back to a quarter ounce, and I only had 4 of those, and I broke those off in an hour. So I was using a 3/16 ounce, drop shot weight, fishing 70-ish feet of water. You can cast it out, wait like 45 seconds, 50 seconds before it sinks.
I don't have the chipping.
You don't have the Chipino. Um, I don't even remember what it. Can I do the halibut? Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Sorry.
halibut.
Halibut, very nice. Good choice.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a
I would have
good
caught
choice.
halibut too.
Sorry. You're good. Should have muted myself, but
Nah,
No.
you're good.
but yeah, that was my point. Is I couldn't get those fish that I thought should be eating in the obvious brush piles, the obvious flooded tree, water inlets, and any of those things where I could graph them. I could get them to follow a jerkbait. I could get them to follow a crankbait. And it wasn't until I started turning around and fishing to what I saw as bait, big balls of bait, deep, that I started actually getting bit. And, I made that adjustment within an hour or two. And after that, it was just took forever to make a cast. Every cast took 2 or 3 minutes, but every cast I was catching a fish. And I just slowly culled up some ridiculous number of times. I think I culled out my limit, all except for the 17-incher that I caught,
Nice.
at least once, if not twice.
Yeah, that was one of the crazy things when I went there as well. Because last year was my first time ever out there. And I noticed a lot of fish on side scan that were just floating in the middle of the channel. But I didn't bother to really target those fish. But they were there. I mean, you could visibly see a huge mark off the side of the point, and that at the channel bends, so on and so forth. But I didn't bother to target them. That was just me though. I probably will this year with live scope. If I didn't have live scope, I'd still just be fishing point.
Yeah, and I feel like we take it for granted. Some of us do anyway. Like Oroville is deep, all right. Oroville is mad deep, 700 feet or something ridiculous. So
Hmm.
when you say, "Oh, my waist spots were blown out in 40 feet," I don't know that that's true for Oroville. Like I consistently graphed and caught bass in 70 to 80 feet in Oroville, and I feel like that's commonplace. Like if you watch some of Bass Union's videos, he's fishing in like 75 to 80 feet of water with 3/4, 1 ounce, 1.5 ounce football jigs
Yep.
to catch those fish that are in 80 feet of water and consistently does it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a unique fishery in the sense that the sky is the limit with how deep you're willing to fish effectively. I mean, I don't have live scope. I know Max, you're going to try it this year, but I would challenge you on one of your pre-fish days if you're pre-fishing to try and catch a fish at 100 feet because I bet you could do it very
Oh
easily on that lake.
yeah.
I'm sure you could even break deeper in some areas because it just
Yeah.
sets up so deep. Like for people who haven't been, there are plenty of points on the main body of water where it's, you're 10 feet from shore and it's 70 feet deep. It's like sheer cliffs almost. And you move off another 10 feet and it's 120 feet. You move off another 10
Yeah.
feet and it's 250 feet deep. It's mind boggling to appreciate just how deep and how steep some of those edges are. Which is why I go back to that step. I feel like every time I can find a step on Oroville, those fish love to congregate on that flat spot on an otherwise, pretty steep and barren rock wall, rock edge.
Yeah, what's funny is my experience during the tournament day, last year was completely different from your guys's. I actually found fish pretty shallow. I'm talking about like 30, 25 feet. And the day before the tournament, while out scouting and pre-fishing, I saw that offshore hump and I went in and I wondered how high the water was going to come up, if the fish were going to move off of it. And luckily, they stayed on there during the tournament day and during the tournament. And but it was so tricky to get them to bite. Like once you got one, you had to wait 10 minutes to get another bite. I mean, not that you had to wait, but you had to keep going at it, keep grinding another 10, 15 minutes to get another bite. And I had worked those fish all day just to get a limit, but it was cool though. I just ran straight to that spot and just worked it the whole day. I had another like secondary point to work off of. if those fish didn't cooperate. But that's what I did. I mean, it's totally opposite from what you did, Joseph. So, um,
I didn't even move, to be honest with you.
yeah, yeah,
I hit spot lock at like 9:30 in the morning, and I think I moved 10 feet in
yeah,
6 hours.
yeah,
I found that school that just kept cycling in, and I
yeah.
didn't. You can
And,
ask Daigo. He watched me sit there for like 2 hours, wondering what I was doing. He even asked me if I was okay because he thought I broke my motor or something.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's the point I'm trying to get to is like for the viewers, if you guys are thinking there's not fish shallow, there are fish shallower too, shallower, and then there's those deep fish. So don't count out, be open minded in a sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Like that's what I mean with Oroville is it's complicated in the sense of, when we think of deep in the bass industry, it's like 20 feet, right?
right.
Like most of everything that we target as a bass fisherman is 20 feet and less effectively. But Oroville is just so unique that, from zero, literally 2 feet deep this time of the year, all the way to 100 feet, there's fish. And it's not that they'll be either in 100 feet or 2 feet or whatever. There's physically that many fish that there are fish at all depths of the water column all the way down. It just pans out to whatever your style is and whatever you're comfortable with fishing and whatever the fish are feeling that day. Like you were saying, shallow at 20, 25 feet. I was fishing a 3 to 5 foot jerk bait, and I was getting followers all the way to the boat, and that was casting in 8 feet of water, 10 feet of water,
Right,
and pulling fish from shore and slightly shallower than that. And I just couldn't get them to commit.
right.
They'd follow an A rig all the way to the boat, or they'd follow a jerk bait all the way to the boat, but they weren't aggressively feeding. And then I switched to deep fish, and those fish were actively feeding all day long. And it wasn't really until the end of the tournament that I started catching fish shallower, which was interesting, but nothing that helped in comparison to the fish that I caught in the 40-ish to 70-ish foot range.
About you,
Mic
Max?
test? Mic test? How's that for sound? I'm trying to figure out the live stream deal. How's that sound go? Better, gentlemen? No?
Can we see comments? Do we have any questions from the audience?
I think it's all on Facebook.
It's all on Facebook is the
Yeah,
problem. So I'm balancing between, you know, looking on Facebook. For some odd reason, StreamYard, I don't know how to set it up yet. I'm sorry, gentlemen. It's
it's fine.
the learning curve. But can you guys hear me fine?
Yep. Oh, them?
Yeah,
Yes. Say yes.
Yeah, I
yeah.
can hear you just fine.
Thank you guys. But for me, I'd never been to Oroville, so the biggest thing for me why I went upriver was because I fished Pine Flat. Pine Flat's my home lake, and I found the better grade of fish upriver on shad, and so that was the only reason why I went upriver. Normally, if the warm rains and the inflow of water, more oxygen-rich water, there's going to be fish upriver along with the bait and everything else just feeding. So that's really the only reason why I went upriver. Still targeting winter patterns, of course, targeting points, coves where it cuts in, where bait can be pushed into. I mean, there was one point in the day for me last year where there was actually fish in like 5 foot of water chasing bait, almost like it was a topwater day. But I didn't take a topwater rod, so I didn't throw a topwater. I had a couple on a jerk bait that didn't keep, but it was just for me, it's just Rocky Point still. That's the simplest way that I could put it down. I wasn't on anything. I didn't have anything special. I was straight up survival fishing. I just went and fished. That's all it was. I mean, it was a tough day of fishing for most. I mean, you guys remember it was like 130 some guys that went,
Yeah,
and there was only what like 20 limits or something like that.
yeah,
So I mean, it was tough fishing for most. I would. have to say completely. But I mean, it was still full on winter pattern. That 3.3 Kitech ball hit Kitech just throwing it into deep water and just creeping it uphill, like how you would fish a Huddleston, essentially, is how I fished it. Um, Probably faster than a Huddleston, because if anybody's seen it, my reel recently, it's just creeping. Instead of keeping it a Kitech, I would keep it moving faster. Um,
So
yeah,
so
yeah,
this is
literally.
a Huddleston, and then this is a Kitech.
Yeah,
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 100%.
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Although
ridiculous. Yeah.
I've been talking to Bob about it more, and he says that we might be going too slow.
That's what I was thinking because it was one of those deals where we're going so slow that we can't force a reaction bite, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
yeah, because it's just creeping too slow that they don't want nothing to do with it, you know. So I mean it's the same thing as
So
Pool's chatterbait that he gave a seminar on, creeping on the bottom and then when he hits something he bumps it.
Yeah.
So it's probably the same thing to elicit a strike, just get it to move faster. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I believe
It's. I think that's kind of. I mean, that's why I was talking about it. I think the Huddleston were the soft swim bait, the big soft swim bait game bite is probably the same idea too. When you're creeping it along the bottom, those fish are tracking it and they're waiting for something different to trigger them to bite. So I think it's just all part of messing with the cadence. Um, don't give up on the retrieve. That's kind of my number one rule. You don't know what's behind it. Maybe all it takes is a twitch. Maybe all it takes is a bump on the rock, on a boulder, or a bump on some wood, and that your bait angles one way or the other way, and that's all it takes for them to trigger that bite. And that's what I kind of utilize with the chatterbait fishing it deep.
feel it. Sorry, y'all. I've been up since 1:30 this morning, and alcohol and late night is kicking my butt right now.
Don't apologize, man.
sir.
Just
Just
get
fall
that.
asleep.
Just get that. Just get that. 200 grand signing bonus.
I wish. I don't get paid anything special for it. You got to go work on the original equipment manufacturer for that.
Yeah.
Um, just here is moral support more than anything.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Again, I apologize. I'm not under the best circumstances right now,
You're good.
but I'm looking forward to some more of these conversations. Again, like Pua said, it's going to be a grind. It's winter. It's cold. Don't be afraid to slow down, and don't be afraid to try something you wouldn't normally think to do if your bite isn't panning out. Turn around and make a cast deeper, or slow down, or speed up, or put some twitches in your rod if you're dragging a Kitech. Just something slightly different, and just try that. But I really feel like the majority of people are going to do well. They're going to have fun. It's just going to be a struggle to find that 15 to 17 inch limit
Quality. Yep.
average. You're going to catch 12s, you're going to catch 10s, you're going to catch 13s, but I definitely feel like those bigger fish, whoever does find them, is really going to be on them as well. And hoping that's one of you guys here, but we'll see if I make it out there and try to pretend like I can defend a luck earned title.
Yeah, man. Come defend that title.
But it's definitely one of those lakes it's massive. Anything can happen to anybody at any time. There's big fish in it. You never know if somebody decides to put in the 68 or 8-inch HUD into their arsenal and gets lucky. You could see a 24, 25, 26 pretty easily.
Yeah.
It happens every tournament at Oroville. If you follow WWBT or whatever and all the others, you definitely see at least one 7 to 11 pounder come out of the
Yeah.
tournament. So
I believe last year they caught one that went 8 pounds or something the week right before we went to Orville on a boat, of
Yeah.
course. But
Yeah. It
yeah,
was.
yeah, that
Yeah.
was a trout eater, a cud eater, whatever you want to call it.
so they're in there, and I think that that's important to not neglect as well. When we say fill a limit and then try and find some kicker fish, that would be my goal going into it. I'm probably not pre-fishing, so I'll be driving down at 1:30 in the morning or something to get to Oroville to launch, and really just looking for covering water with a bait in my hand that I've got confidence that works well at, blind cast, fan casting, and hoping to stumble across one or two actively feeding fish that I can then slow down and break down that bite to whether it's a drop shot or a flick shake or Kitech ball head or an A rig or whatever it is that they're specifically keyed into. Um, but hoping I can find that reactionary bite.
I would agree.
All right, gents, I definitely need to get back. I kind of feel rude dipping from the dinner table, but really
No, you're
appreciate
good,
you
man.
having
Yeah.
me. Thank you so much. Again, good luck to everybody. Definitely looking forward to our next session and chat with you gents later.
Yes, sir.
All right, Joseph.
Have a good night.
Good night, man.
Dropping the juice.
Yeah. I guess for
Uh,
everybody that's listening, Joseph was the guy that won last year on Oroville. So that is the juice right there.
yeah. Basically, he told you guys how he won last year. So, I'm not saying that I will work again this year, but it might play. You never
Yeah,
know.
my play. Yeah.
It's always something to think about, especially during tournament fishing. Um, there's a question. Sorry guys, I'm not I'm trying to look over here at my phone because that's where all the comments are. But question is, will the three of us provide more information, this kind of coverage, in the future that we're doing today? Um, what do you think, Paul? Should we continue to tell people?
Um, I mean, it's not a bad idea. I mean, we'll give you guys some pointers. Maybe not
What's
like
trying?
all, maybe not all the juice like what Joseph just gave you guys, but maybe some pointers. It all comes back down to just getting out on the water. So um, I mean, yeah, I mean, if you guys want some pointers on like a lake that we fish or you fish, uh, by all means, just ask and you shall receive.
Don't I wouldn't say that because there's going to be a lot of guys that want your Delta launch spot. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't
See,
say that.
certain things are confidential, so it's like, but it just goes back to I've said it before in the past. It's it's not about the spots. It's about the
Yeah,
techniques and the times that you put into a spot because there's fish all over the water. So it's just if you can find those key spots and work the baits correctly, present it correctly, and if they're feeding, I mean, there's so many variables that come into play when you're talking about uh, catching a fish. Sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's an accident, but if you're in a particular spot and you catch more than two fish, then that's kind of something you might want to take into consideration and think about why, you know. But there's fish everywhere, you know. I mean, if you're gonna ask me, like, hey man, where's the Delta hotspot? It's just there's a lot of big fish on the Delta, and I can tell you where to go, and if you go there and don't catch fish, then like I get blamed for it. So I've if you want techniques, if you want advice, like I can definitely provide that. But you have to get out there because everybody's got a lot of hot spots, or waypoints, and there's a reason why they have those waypoints. They've figured out how to catch those fish that live there. So just got to get out on the water, guys. I
Yeah,
can't give up. I can't give up every waypoint.
it is a lot of time on the water though for the guys that
Yeah,
are still struggling. I mean, we all know. I mean, Damien is probably one of the best, if the best, on the West Coast. And
yeah,
there's just times where he just picks something up and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna throw this here," and he catches a fish. And that only comes really from time on the water. I mean, even like his Carolina rig square bill kind of deal.
yeah.
You don't just magically think up about that and throw it during a derby or a random fishing day. You've had some sort of experience or success doing it
Right,
before you even throw it. So,
right.
I mean, you have guys in here that are saying he tried a chatterbait in 50 feet and failed, but at the same time, that same guy drop shots his way to two-time Angler of the Year. So,
Right, right. Yeah,
Robert, yes, we're talking about you,
Mr. Yamamoto. But yeah,
Robert.
going back to Mr. Damien Tao. He just won recently, right? At Eastman.
Yeah,
Yeah, and if you follow him, you would know that he didn't even pre-fish, right?
no, no pre-fish. I think he
Right,
was striper fishing the week before or something like
right,
that,
right. And
which he's been
and
doing for a
and
long.
right. And that kind of just goes back to like what we were talking about is just time on the water. Yeah, it is his home lake, but at the same time, it's a lot of people's home lake. It's Max's home lake.
I don't
And
consider
it
it my
Pine Flat is, huh?
home lake.
But a lot of guys locally in that Fresno area, they fish Eastman. They fish all those surrounding lakes, and it's just they put time on the water. I mean, Damien's probably been fishing it for so long that he kind of knows it from the back of his head. Like where to go during these conditions, during certain conditions. So it's not like he just goes out there and starts throwing his favorite baits and he's gonna catch them. That just don't work like
The crazy thing though is that they catch Damien LB 500, so that was interesting for me.
that.
That was interesting for me. Maybe Damien's pulling some stuff out of my books, but nothing against Damien. Now it is, he has a lot of history on it, but then he doesn't let history dictate what he does. I mean, any body of water, there's always going to be community holes depending on, water level. There's just areas where fish will use it as a highway. Fish will always be there. That's your community holes, your hot spot. I guess it's, if you want to call them hot spots, depending on water level, of course. So I personally don't consider that lake my home lake because you got to remember I fished it one year and that was when it was like 8% down. So the fish were in a
It was
barrel.
a pond.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it was a pond. So it's not really fair. It's not my home lake technically. So you know, I got lucky that one year. Is what it is.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Luck does play a big factor. Um, but yeah, guys, I mean, if if you guys have questions, you guys can just ask me or Max personally. I mean, you could just send us a DM, um, and we'll answer it the best we can.
so I got a question for you. Without putting in time on the water due to obligations, what would you take away from the time you do get on the water? Which is probably the real question. Because time on the water is very subjective.
Hmm.
So let's say the time that you do get on the water, the few hours that you do get on the water, what would you be looking for? As in to learn or, to figure out things as you're on the water for those very few hours.
Right.
I guess
Yeah.
is what he's trying to get at. So what would you do, Boy?
So if you have a fish finder, I would probably utilize that for like on a brand new body of water. I would probably utilize that and scan around for the first hour. So if you had time to, let's say the night before, right, you're prepping to go to that lake. I would probably take a quick glance at the map and plan out where or what area you're gonna go to, and then I would just scan that area with my fish finder. Look for bait. Look for uh, not just everything under the water, but everything outside of the water too. Like what Joseph was talking about, birds possibly, or just the conditions on the water. Like, is it windy? Is it calm? Uh, are there trees? Are there, what kind of boulders can you see just from your eyes? And then, but if you do have a fish finder too, then I would utilize that to kind of help you with what you see and then what comes up on, per se, your side scan, your down scan, and kind of, I mean, at the same time, you're looking for bait, you're looking for fish, but you want to see what structure you're being surrounded by that would help you, I guess, in a sense, locate fish because you can't see everything on your fish finder unless you're like this guy and you have a live scope. But traditional sonars, sometimes you just cannot see them, and that's where it comes back down to just your what you started out with, your fishing instincts. Man, this rock looks good. Let me fish it for a little bit, or on your fish finder, like, oh, there's a boulder on the side scan to my left. Let me cast out there. And you'd be surprised. I mean, that's what I first started out doing. And once you catch fish, then it's like you really want to scan that area and see what's really going on around there. And if you do find bait eventually, then that's kind of like the light bulb, like ding, that fish was there because there was bait there. Uh, That's how I would approach like a brand new lake. I would just spend the first hour scanning, looking for structure, both visually and with my electronics. And once you can locate something that you you would intuitively think that would hold fish, then go ahead and try a couple casts. Or if not, if you find bait fish or if you find fish, you see them on your fish finder, then go ahead and start making casts.
For me, without if I didn't have the time to eliminate water, or I wouldn't say eliminate water, but take away the take away the having time to go out there and figure things out. If I didn't have the time to go figure things out, I would just stick with the seasonal patterns for me and then try to expand from there. So let's say if it's the spawn and the fish are up on beds, and I know there's fish up on beds already, instead of running all the way to the back to fish bedding fish, I would fish the points leading out because primarily I fish offshore stuff. So I would always start scanning those offshore points first. That's just me. Um, Look for those offshore fish, the pre-spawn, post-spawn fish, seasonal pattern wise. Um, that's just me. I I would go at least an hour to maybe even 2 hours of just scanning before I make a cast. but that's only because I'm comfortable with my side scan to see that, oh yeah, there's a school of fish here, or there's just a rock pile here. Let's say if I think it's a really good rock pile that I want to make a cast onto it, I will make a cast to it without even seeing fish on it, just to see if I get bit. But if I don't, or if I do and I don't get bit, I immediately just move. I don't spend more than maybe a minute on the cast because it just depends on seasonal. If it's the wintertime, slow it down. Of course, actually work the bait. Or if it's during the summer, you could go pretty quick and you'll get bit. Um, I rely heavily on my electronics for me specifically. The biggest one is for me is side scan and then 2D sonar. Um, believe it or not, some of the fish that you see on sides, or sorry, some of the fish you see on 2D sonar, you can't see on your side scan or your down imaging
Yep.
because they're stuck so close to the bottom that traditional sonar actually picks up the return of the fish. So you kind of need everything. Everything kind of comes together and helps. So if you went over a point and you didn't see anything on side scan, try turning it to 2D, especially right now during the winter. You could see a lot of fish on 2D without even seeing it on side scan because they're hugged to the bottom. So for me it's electronics based. I the mapping for myself, I don't really fish a certain depth for fish, as in let's say if I caught fish in 35 feet of water, I don't mark it as the fish are in 35 feet of water for me.
start mark, start marking everything 35 foot.
Yeah, I don't just start fishing everything in 35 foot of water. It's more of where along the contour lines the fish are for me, why it was on that certain contour line. Um, another thing would be say if say if I caught the fish on top of a high spot. The real question is, was the fish right on top of the high spot or was it off to the side of the high spot? And that normally is dictated based off of weather, for me at least. Um, it's all of those little pieces of puzzles that every time you go out, you kind of have to really, I wouldn't say think, but I would say consider the factors. Because essentially, if you could figure out whether they're on top of a high spot and why they're on top of a high spot, then you could run around and fish other high spots and catch more fish. Um, like pre-spawn, like right now, winter to pre-spawn. If it's a sunny day and it's a high spot, more than likely there's going to be a bass sitting on top of that high spot just sunbathing. So if you look at this relates back to your mapping. If you're mapping, you can see that's a high spot and it's a sunny bluebird day. There's probably fish on that high spot just sunbathing. Most likely, not always, but yeah. Oh dear, the questions are coming for.
Oh man, you can answer some of them too. You can start off with some of them, answering some of them, and then I'll
And
follow.
yes, Ryan Murphy is correct here. He says sometimes they're in the rocks and you won't see them at all until you catch one.
Yep.
Yeah. Or if you see one, we're talking electronics, of course. You won't see them. You won't see all of them. You might see one sitting on top of a rock, and then you catch them, and then the whole school lifts. But you
Yep.
won't see them all the time. Yeah. John Myers, good old John Myers.
Hey John.
You arrive at you arrive at a lake and you have never fished during the winter. What four lures would you use? You want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first.
During the winter, I would go with a jig. Always have to have a jig. Either a finesse jig of some sort or a Kitech jig. If I'm going for bigger fish, I will throw a Bass Patrol full rubber jig. Um, it's not really a big jig, but it's more compact. Um, so a jig of some sort, a finesse or somewhat big jig. A 3.3 Kitech. on a 3/16 ounce head, ball head. Those two, a jerk bait as a search bait, and then for the last one, I'm not a fan of throwing a drop shot. So as regardless of whether it's a highland reservoir, which is extremely deep, or a lowland reservoir where it has a lot of high spots and it's gradual, I would still take a lipless crankbait, LV500. Um, I've caught fish, spotted bass, burning a lipless crankbait in the middle of winter, which is insane. A lipless crankbait or rock crawler style of some sort of crankbait, essentially.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Paul. What four lures would you
Yeah.
take during the winter you never been to?
For me, it number one would definitely be a drop shot. Only because if I could see them below me using my electronics, I would like to see if there's a school with them. So that would definitely be number one down bait for me. Uh, my search bait would be a chatterbait. It's a year-round bait. I throw it year-round. Depending on how deep the reservoir is, I'd probably vary between a 3/4 ounce to a half ounce. And then second would probably be a spoon. And then fourth would probably, it would probably be either a spinner bait or a tailspin. So it just like whatever I feel like, yeah, I'd alternate it between a spinner bait or a tailspin. But yeah, those are my four baits. I You still want to search for them. For me, you still want to search for them, see if they're gonna react, and then you want to look for those fish that are just hugged tight to the bottom too. And um, it's kind of funny how a jig is not on my list, but eventually throughout the day, I might throw it. I might not. It just depends. But yeah, those are my top four baits for a brand new lake.
One more. We'll do one more, then we'll probably call it quits, gentlemen. Um, Matthew Brannon, good old Matt B. How do you know when to leave fish onto something else? How do you know when to leave fish and move on to something else?
You want me to start?
Yeah, go for it. How are you?
How do you know when to leave fish? So I don't have forward facing sonar, so I don't see these fish swimming around live right in front of me. And I think for me, that kind of helps because it's funny because, side story, I always joke with Max and some of the other guys, like, man, it's kind of contradicting because if I were to have it, I would be stuck on a school of fish all day long, and if they don't bite, I don't care. I'd still be stuck on them. So, there's just a little side story, but for me, since I don't have forward-facing sonar, if I could see them on my 2D, on my side scan, and I know that they're there, they're gonna stay there on that offshore hump. Or actually, you know what? A good example is um, Berryessa. I was there. I fished an offshore hump, and these fish would not bite, and I didn't take the liberty to leave. But once I did leave, I found school of fish, like literally, like right on the next point, right next to that hump. And I think you have to know. It's kind of up to the angler. Like you have to give yourself some time to work those fish, and I think an hour, 2 hours, if they're not biting, I'm gone. Even if I continually see them there, uh, it's just it's hard to leave. I know it's hard to leave those schools of fish, but you have to be able to tell yourself to just give yourself 30 minutes, an hour. Um, if they're gonna bite, you would have had a hell of a day already. But if they're not feeding, they're not gonna. You have to come to terms that they're not feeding at that moment.
For me personally, I don't worry about it. Me, I just do. So the way I approach it is I always approach it from, can I get them to react first? So let's just say, it's an area where I can throw a reaction bait. You know, can I get them? Can I get the fish to react first? If I don't get them to react, can I get them to bite a finesse? A finesse lure of some sort, whether it's a jerk bait or sorry, not jerk bait, finesse, a Cinco, a Cinco, a drop shot, a jig. If I can't get them to eat a finesse, after considering all the factors and considering this is the best lure to throw in this scenario, if I can't get them to react or finesse them to bite, then I just leave. That's the way I treat it, and I only make maybe no more than 10 casts, you know, 5 to 10 casts, give or take. Make a couple different casts on a reaction bait, a couple different angles to see if they'll eat it. If they don't want to eat it, try to finesse them. If I can't get them to eat a finesse in the first 5 casts, 4 or 5 casts, sometimes even one cast, if I throw it over there and they don't eat it in the first 5 drags, I just pick up and I keep moving. Because it's one of those deals where you can stay there and try to catch those fish, but there's always feeding windows across the lake, and there's always fish that are willing to eat across the lake in certain areas. So if those fish don't want to bite, there's no reason for you to stay. That's just the way that I work it. I don't like to waste time, I guess you could say. So, but that's changed though. Yeah, unfortunately, live scope is not a good thing for me. So it may go on the marketplace pretty soon. It's very hard to leave fish when on live scope because
I
for the
bet.
guys that don't, yeah, for the guys that don't have live scope yet, when you make a cast out there and you can see them follow it down or you see them follow it, to the boat and actually chase it, then you think in your mind that you get those fish to bite. And the problem is they don't always bite. So they're just interested. They're not willing to eat.
Yeah, just
So
curious.
yeah, they're just curious creatures. So that it ends up actually hurting you more, say, in any given fishing day, not just a tournament setting. On any fishing day, it actually hurts you more because you're sitting there not trying to figure out the fish. You're sitting there trying to catch a fish.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, two different sides of the spectrum, but
yeah.
for what it is. But we're probably gonna wrap it up there. We're pulling up to an hour. We'll probably try to do this probably every week. I know Joseph is there was something that we had in our group chat that I really wanted us to talk about next week because Joseph is a trout angler and you know he fishes he came from the trout angling side of it and there's little things about trout fishing that also relates to the big swim bait guys that might help them you know get on
Yeah,
that really
was
big.
this what we were talking about? Kind of the
Yeah,
other. Okay.
yeah, the
Yeah.
bugs,
Yeah.
his
The
bugs
food
and
chain.
yeah, the
Yeah.
food chain, what guys don't consider. So thank you all. We have it's crazy, but I know most of you guys are all Yak-a-bass family, family. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
So
Thanks for showing up.
thanks for showing up, guys. We'll be back out here next week sometime.
Good night.